Welcome to the Financial Self-Care Club, Shannon.
Thanks, Christy. I'm so excited to be here with you.
I am so excited you're here. And so we met through the small inner workings of the interwebs. We worked with the same marketing coach and then ended up in the same copywriting community
Yeah.
and instantly bonded because financial planner, a lot of the practical stuff, and I dipped my toe in money mindset as well, but coming across a money mindset coach like you, I was super pumped, and we just started bonding right away about all things money mindset. So I'm super pumped to have you on the show today. We are tackling a big topic. We're talking all about imposter syndrome today. So tell us a little bit about what even is imposter syndrome?
So the way that I would describe imposter syndrome is that feeling when you don't feel like you belong, like somehow you are less than, maybe not smart enough, or you just don't have enough experience to play in the big wigs, and you just feel like you don't belong. You feel that you are somehow an outsider or an imposter in your line of work or as a business owner, whatever it might be.
And what does that look like in your head? Like, what are the thought patterns that people are typically having? Like, how can you identify when you're having imposter syndrome?
Well, it might sound something like, who am I to be up here on this stage or being interviewed on this podcast as a quote expert when I still feel like I'm learning? And the truth is, yes, we are all both work in progress and experts simultaneously. So whenever you notice that little voice inside that tries to convince you that somehow you shouldn't be up on the stage, you shouldn't be the one answering the interview questions, then you know that the imposter syndrome has sort of shown up to the party.
Yeah, and it's so common. It really is. So many women that I speak with deal with imposter syndrome. And I would love to hear more about how this has manifested for you and throughout your journey of becoming a money mindset coach.
Mm-hmm.
Where did imposter syndrome start to creep in? How has this kind of affected you personally?
Whew, that's a good question. And I do believe in the importance of us like showing up and speaking our truth and being vulnerable and embracing that as, quote, coaches and experts, but also to know that at one point we're a beginner in this, even if we're an expert now. So for me, imposter syndrome, it started right off the bat. So I originally worked in corporate finance for the first 7 years of my career. And then I hired a coach, had a whole life transformation, then got certified as a coach. But when I started my own business, I very much felt like an imposter, because you got to remember, when you're in corporate, someone else is setting your salary and someone else is deeming what your time is worth. So you get that consistent paycheck every 2 weeks. But when you're out there on your own as a business owner, all of a sudden you have to come up with what your time is worth and what that value, put a number to that value. And I very much had a hard time with that in the beginning of my coaching business, especially because I had just gotten certified. So it was like, who am I to help people with career purpose coaching, which is what I started my business as, because I just started doing this. But the truth is, like, I was kind of discounting all the life experiences I had had that led me to that point in time. And I think that's a really important reminder for all of us that, like, we do know enough, we are experienced enough, and we can also be humble enough to be curious and ask the right questions to learn as we go. But it definitely reared its ugly head in the beginning for me, especially.
Yeah, and I think that's huge to think about, that it manifests a lot in the way of experience, like maybe not having that formal training or having had years of education in a topic is something that can make someone feel like an imposter. But you make a great point. Life experience really goes a long way. So tell me a little bit about how people can kind of start to realize like the value in their life experience. Like, I think about it as, you don't have to always be the expert or know everything. You could be the girl who's one step ahead, two steps ahead, and you're kind of reaching your hand back and you're pulling somebody up to where you are. So let's talk a little bit about how that life experience, is valuable and does qualify you to serve and to help other people.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things that life experience teaches us is to ask the right questions. So instead of assuming that we know the answer, it's actually much more evolved to be in a position of asking the right questions. So especially as a coach, and you know this too, and working with your clients, like the more that we can really help people understand themselves better by asking the right questions to get those mindset blocks front and center, the better. And I think with life experience, you don't have to be a coach. Like, you can learn how to ask yourself those questions and really get to know yourself and increase your awareness as you go through your journey. One way that I think is really fun to do this is celebrating your wins along the way. So when you are in a position where you're like not feeling so great, you might not have that win list ready to go. But when you do have like a high moment and you're feeling good about yourself, kind of gather a place where you can keep track of that, both in your own words, in the words of your clients who think that your service is making a difference in their life. And then when you are having sort of an imposter syndrome creep in, you can go and look at that document and be like, oh, okay, let me gain some perspective here. I've actually done some great work, either in my profession or, an offhanded compliment from a stranger or your mom or your sister or somebody. So life experience certainly plays into things.
Yeah. And I love that idea of your document where you can kind of gather all of your praise and your celebrations and remind yourself of all the work that you have done. Because I feel like it's so easy to forget the impact and the value that you offer. Do you feel like a lot of your clients and the women that you're working with are kind of forgetting or neglecting or not acknowledging how far they've actually come?
Yes. And I think the other way that this shows up quite frequently is when we think we don't know enough because we were listening to the voice of the imposter. And then all of a sudden we go and buy another course or purchase another book or listen to 13 episodes of a podcast. And trust me, I am a voracious reader. I love consuming information. So I play on both sides of this, but I do believe that the imposter thoughts can drive us to invest in a lot of extra things in our business that, it's helpful to have external strategy to a point. But if we don't have a mindset that helps us to feel empowered and capable enough, just as we are at our starting point, then investing in a strategy will only take you so far. Like, you won't get the full return on your investment if you invest in a strategy and don't have the right mindset backing you up. So I see that quite a bit, in addition to, the person who says, like, I don't have enough experience. Generally speaking, their next step is, okay, then I went and bought all of these courses. I think we all have a course graveyard where sits courses that we have spent thousands or hundreds of dollars on, and the course just, you have lifetime access. So you're like, I'll get to that one day. And I think you gain so much more by just like celebrating a win that you've had and then seeing, asking yourself, I'm a different person now. So like, what has changed or evolved about me? What did I learn from that experience? And how can I, help recreate that to celebrate another win? Because you're always building on that life experience.
I love that. I think we all need to celebrate our success more often and acknowledge it. And I definitely relate to the course graveyard. I did this recently where I invested in a strategy-oriented course, and the strategy wasn't even something that aligned with me or felt good to me. And it was a mindset. It was all mindset blocks that I needed to work through. But it's so common to kind of feel like, let's just throw some money at a problem and get a strategy and it'll all work out. So how can someone identify when they're maybe throwing money at a problem or investing in a course because they don't feel like they're ready, as opposed to just either working on their mindset or just kind of going out there and proving to themselves through working with people and through taking action that they're ready and that they are that person that can serve? How can people navigate that?
That is a good question. And it comes and goes. Like for me, I would say that when I'm working with clients, if they can consistently show up and like they've obviously invested in my coaching, right? So they have put money forward, but then it's my job as a coach to help support them in making the most of that investment. So I clarify from the very beginning with my clients that I'm not some expert guru on the top of the mountain and you're trying to like climb up from the bottom to reach the peak. You know, we're in this together and we can probably learn from each other along the way. But what I ask of you as a client is to show up fully. So meaning like you're coming to the session, you're being honest, you're being vulnerable about what's really going on in your mind, which generally is not like, most people will say, oh, your Instagram is great. Like, how do you write your Instagram posts? And it's like, that's not what this is really about. Like, I could give you a 1-pager cheat sheet on how to write more engaging Instagram posts. But what if you have like deeper fears around being visible on social media? Because perhaps you're worried that if you're out there visible, showing your success, other people are going to like mooch off of your success and ask for money and you're not going to be able to say no. Or maybe you're worried that, you know, to show up on social media actually means being vulnerable about having a tough period in your business. And then other people are going to see that you're in financial trouble and you feel ashamed of that. And so there's usually something deeper below the surface. And as a coach, it's my job to try to help people dig into that. I would say if you're not already working with a coach, one of the best ways that you can start that introspective process is just by getting a notebook. It can be any old notebook and doing a brain dump at the beginning of every day. Some people call this morning pages. You and I do this on the writing marathon where you sit down and put whatever is swimming around in your head, all those thoughts of not good enough, not smart enough, not experienced enough, you put it on paper and then see what kind of shift in your energy you experience. And perhaps you feel a little bit lighter and then you can go take that, you know, little risk or brave action that you've been feeling sort of intimidated by. And then check in with yourself and ask, okay, well, how did I feel after that experience versus before? And what did I learn from that? Like, what would I do differently next time? Start getting a notebook and almost coaching yourself, if that makes sense. And if coaching is not in the budget at this time, that would be a really good first step for people.
Yeah, it's almost like building up a toolbox of different things that you can do when you start to feel that way. So, you know, getting it out all on paper in a journal is a great tool to work through your thoughts and to gain an awareness of your beliefs and those fears. What are some other tools or exercises that people can use to kind of start to gain some insight into their money mindset and to overcome and combat their imposter syndrome?
Well, going back to this sort of ties into the question you were asking before of like, how do you know when to invest versus when to just trust that you are experienced enough to go forward with it? I think as you're sitting down and sort of asking yourself some of these questions and reflecting, you're going to get a sense of, you're going to build this log, let's say, of past experiences where maybe you have invested and it worked out really well. Like you trusted your intuition, you invested and it worked out great. And then you're going to have these other experiences where you can say, okay, looking back, I think I was actually more in need of some inner work instead of just throwing money at a strategy. So for sure, the journaling on both of those questions to help you get started is important. And then I think too, meditating is a really good, whatever form of meditation you prefer. I know people get a little bit intimidated or shell-shocked by that phrase, but going out for a walk, having a regular practice where you are kind of like sitting with what you're experiencing, even if you don't want to write it down, and then envisioning what it is that you would like to have happen in the future, right? So where am I today? Where is it that I want to be? And like trying to train yourself to listen to that inner guidance system that will help you know, maybe I do really need an expert to help me with this particular challenge that I'm having with my sales page or with my funnel. And if that's the answer that you're getting when you check in with yourself, remember that how you go about that doesn't have to look like how someone else has gone about it. So you might not need a 12-month mastermind investment of $30,000. Maybe you just need like a one-off session with a sales strategy coach or a copywriter to help you with that copy. So allowing yourself to not get like overly in the deep end where you're drowning in these investments, but taking some baby steps to help you in the right direction of what's going to be most impactful for you. I think when people have the money mindset blocks, a lot of times it's that there's a fear of making more money, like whether you're going to be capable of making that money or how much better or worse your life might get by making money. Right? Some people fear that like if they make a lot of money, their whole family will disassociate from them because all of a sudden like you're putting yourself up on a pedestal, whereas other people think the family's going to actually want you to let them borrow money and you're not going to be able to say no. So it really looks different for each person. But I think those sort of intuitive building that awareness internally through meditation, journaling, obviously working with a coach is another good way to do it. But if you want to start free and start small, I would start with those two things.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think kind of speaking to the how do you know whether you just need to get out and do it or if it makes sense to invest in a strategy. To me, it's sounding like the difference is the energy that you're coming to it with. So are you coming to an investment in a course or a coach or a program because you have spent time visioning what you want and you know where you're trying to go and this is something that you know can help you to get there? Or are you coming at that investment from an energy of, oh my gosh, I need to be able to do this so that I can get to this level, and it's frantic and it feels like you're just trying to solve a problem, you're throwing money at a problem. So I think maybe that's
expecting the expert to do the work for you is a good sign that, you know, chances are that's not going to work out so well for you. Like you'll get a full return on your investment much more so if you're the one who's actually taking some brave action, gaining some evidence. Almost think of yourself as a journalist, like go take action for a week and then reevaluate and be like, okay, objectively, what information did I gather here? What do I bring to the table? And if I were to hire someone to help me, what kind of strengths do they need to have to balance out what I bring to the table? Because you also want to have like a more equitable partnership if you are going to invest in a strategist.
Yeah, I think that's huge too. Your point about kind of being a journalist or a scientist and gathering data around your thoughts and your feelings and your beliefs and your fears. How can people kind of separate themselves from the emotional aspect of thoughts and fears? And I mean, I guess you can't really separate yourself, but how can you start to put yourself in that role of an observer who is just gathering information around where you are right now without getting into that place of beating yourself up and feeling negative about it? Like, how can you step into that role of the observer?
Well, I think a lot of times you do first have to journal or reflect from the standpoint of the critical voice in your head. Like a lot of times that does come more naturally when we're getting started with this work. So if that's what's at the forefront of your mind, go ahead and do the brain dump to get those negative, limiting, heavy, draining thoughts that your inner critic would like you to believe. Get them out on paper. That's fine. And then if you need to go take a walk, take a shower, go work out, you know, go have a cup of tea to sort of shift that energy and then come back to it from the standpoint that, you know, not only is there that critical voice in your head, almost like the devil on your shoulder, you also have a more angelic figure who has your best interest in mind and believes in your true potential. So then start to train your brain to say, okay, we've got out everything the inner critic had to say. It was loud, it was proud, it said what it needed to say, it's going in the back seat now. What does my inner guidance system, people call it their inner mentor, the wisdom that you have inside of you about your potential, what does that voice want you to know right now that's like in your highest and best interest? And try to, once you get the other stuff out, then try to reflect from that standpoint so that you can feel a little bit of a relief when you get all that crap out and then you start to open up space for what's actually true. You know, like there is more in there.
It's kind of like speaking life to it and putting it out there in words or in writing. And once it's there, then you can kind of look at it from that observational point of view. But when it stays in your head, you just kind of feel the emotions and the negativity around it. When you can speak life into it or write it down, it sounds like that's when you can start to observe it and reframe it and really
And make
question if
choices.
that belief is real.
Exactly. That is one of the key questions you can ask yourself is how true is this really? And if I believe this to be true going forward, how is that going to impact my ability to show up in my business? Like, will I be likely to take the action I need to take to drive revenue into my business? Or will this limit me in being able to do that? And then I'm going to be right back at square one where I'm frustrated that I'm not where I want to be financially in my business.
I
So
love
yeah,
that.
listening to those two voices, and of course, the critical voice is going to be louder than the voice of wisdom. But I think when you write it down, you start to get familiar with when each of those two voices is talking, and you get to then redirect and choose which one you want to listen to that's going to support you the most in moving forward. And oftentimes, the second voice, the one of like the inner guidance system, it sounds more traditionally like how you would speak to someone else. Like if you called me and you were stressed out about something, how would I respond to you? With love, with compassion, and then of course with like a growth mindset of what are we learning from this and how do we want to go forward? But it wouldn't sound like I was, you know, throwing you off a ledge or something. It's more
Yeah.
supportive than that.
You can give yourself a little bit of grace.
Exactly.
I
Yeah.
love that. I think that's huge. And um, how about if people are starting to become aware of those thoughts and they're observing them? How can you start to shift that mindset, right? You've become aware, you're in observation mode, you're giving yourself some grace, but then how can you really start to make that shift into a more positive mindset where you're not the imposter? You know that you're there to serve and that you are adding value into the world, and you're not worried about if you're good enough or, if you're at that right level to help people. How can that shift be made?
Well, certainly it has to come through a combination of things. So the two primary parts of this are, of course, the sort of journaling, reflective part where maybe you're putting pen to paper and saying, here's the old belief where I thought, I really didn't have what it took to go up and have this speaking engagement. And then the new reframe might be like, you know what, I have learned enough and I am 2 steps ahead of the audience, and what I have to say will really benefit them. You make your reframe on paper, that is part of it. But I would say the second component is challenging yourself to take consistent action so that you can gain the experience of stepping into that new mindset. Think about it, like experiential learning is going to stick with you much longer than if you were just reading from a book and writing notes. That can only take you so far. But if you are willing to step into the new mindset by taking the action that would be associated with that more empowered and positive belief, chances are when you do that, you will gain both clarity and confidence from taking that action. And that will convince the negativity bias in your brain that, you know what, hey, that was worth it. I want to do that again. Whereas the inner critic voice is going to try to keep you playing small for as long as possible because it doesn't want you to be exposed to any kind of risk. And of course, there's like a short-term comfort associated with that. Yeah, I don't have to go up on a stage in front of 100 people. I can be at home watching Netflix. That feels way more comfortable now. But if you envision doing that speaking gig, helping all those people in the audience, getting paid to show up there and share your expertise, chances are like that's going to feel better in the sustainable long term. So I would definitely recommend like the introspective component as well as giving yourself grace as you take the action to gain confidence and clarity and really step into what that new mindset sounds like for you.
I think that's huge. That's one of the biggest things that I see with money and money mindset is kind of that avoidance and feeling stuck and staying stuck and not taking the action to improve and to grow and to overcome and to get to the next level. How can people get out of that avoidance? How can you start taking action? I think it feels overwhelming. It feels scary. So what would be a good first step if someone's in that avoidance mode to get into action?
So for avoidance, what I would have to say about that is, first, making sure that you are giving yourself time and space to get clear about what it is that you're really avoiding. Because oftentimes, I don't think we really know what that is. We just think in our head that something is going to be scary, and we don't do it. Or we think, I can't go on video. I should invest in this video course that's going to help me to perfect my video and create a YouTube channel. But in reality, like, let's say you pay that strategist $2,000, $3,000 to help you with that. If you still have a belief that people are going to be jealous of your success underneath it all, or you're going to feel guilty for having more than someone else has when you create that successful YouTube channel and it's out there, those are the kind of like underlying things that are driving your avoidance, or maybe your tendency to continue investing in all these outside people as opposed to trusting your inner guidance system. I think those are the things in terms of money mindset that we all have to continuously be in, like, reporter, scientist mode, gathering that information and really asking ourselves, like, okay, before I do anything, what is it that I believe will happen if I have a successful Instagram, YouTube channel, whatever it might be, with 500,000 followers? What is it that I'm so, excited about with that? What is it that I'm really fearful of? And how is that showing up in my tendency to ignore that to-do list every day? Because you can teach yourself. You're a resourceful person. You're smarter than you think you are, and you are way more capable than you might believe.
Yeah.
But we stop ourselves from stepping into our potential because we were afraid of something about that, like the success of it, the potential failure of it. And so much of that, I think, is rooted in how we were raised to think about money and feel about money. And we are super unconscious to that for the most part, because it's just autopilot. 3 decades, 4 decades, 2 decades, however long you've been around, it's like you've been programmed to believe a certain thing to be true. And now is your chance to really get clear about what that thing is, and then decide how that's impacting you and what you want to do about it.
Yes. Oh, that is fire, Shannon. So many good nuggets in there. I've so enjoyed our conversation today. If you could leave the audience with one thing, what do you think would be their biggest takeaway from our conversation today?
You already have what it takes to get started.
Yes, girl. Yes, I love it. That is
myself included, yourself included. Like, we have big dreams. We know enough to get started today.
Yeah, because we all have imposter syndrome. I have it. You've done it.
That's why we're talking about it.
Exactly. You overcome.
We're experts because we're dealing with it.
100%. You teach what you need to learn, and you deal with it, you overcome, but then new stuff just comes up as you up level. Maybe initially, you were talking about how it's making money and covering bills, but then that next level might be like, okay, now that I'm making money, there might be fear around delegating, outsourcing. So always, it's a journey, right? So no need to beat ourselves up if we are dealing with imposter syndrome. But thank you, Shannon, for sharing so many amazing tools and mindset tips and exercises and resources that we can use to start to overcome and combat imposter syndrome when it inevitably rears its ugly head. And for anyone watching out there, listening out there, who wants to kind of get started on some exercises and jump in, I know you have some awesome free resources for people. Tell us how they can get started with that and where to go find it.
Sure. So I have, when we were talking about journaling, I know I mentioned that a bunch. So if that sort of felt overwhelming or confusing to you, I have the perfect money mindset journal for you. It's available on my website in the freebies section. So you can go there, put your name, your email address, and Christy will link to that in the notes here so that you can get started with some of those reflection questions. So that would be a good first step, I think.
I love that. Yeah, because we talked a ton about journaling, key theme of our conversation, journaling, talking it out, whatever that looks like. And if you're feeling overwhelmed with journaling and where to start there, that's a perfect place, because Shannon's going to give you some prompts that you can get started and really start learning about your money mindset and being able to make those shifts and those reframes and start to realize, yes, you are enough with what you have right now. You are worthy. You are deserving. and you are meant for so much goodness in the world. Thank you so much again, Shannon. I'm so excited that we got to chat today.
Me too. This was awesome.
You being on the show.
Yeah. Thanks, Chrissy.